Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our panel discussion with Tyk and Fusion Professionals. Today, we're going to be talking about going digital, building a connected technology environment. We have two amazing panelists amongst us who I'll be introducing shortly. I am Buddha, product evangelist at Tyk, and I'm going to be your facilitator in today's session. So what are we going to be talking about today? So let's set the scene a little bit. In an ever-changing business environment and an increasingly digital world, organizations today are tasked with finding new and smarter ways to discover business opportunities, create better outcomes, and increase operational efficiency all at the same time. We are talking about potentially omni-channel, multi-device environments that need to be highly scalable, highly available, and robust. And at the same time, we cannot really compromise on a great customer experience because at the end of the day, customers are the ones that we are building products for. And the success or failure of a business is pretty much tied to whether we can bring value or success for our customers. So with that being the scene, we are going to be looking at two very interesting perspectives today from the point of view of a solution provider in Fusion Professionals, and from the point of view of Tyk, we have an API gateway and management platform that essentially powers some of these connected technologies. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our first panelist, Paul Cowell from Fusion Professionals.
Thanks, Buddha. That'd be great. So yes, Paul Cowell, I'm a solution architect. I've been working in technology and digital business for over 20 years, mostly in the space of data and integration, but with an enterprise kind of flavor. So working with very large organizations, mostly in Australia and the US. These days, I'm also the CEO of Fusion Professionals. We're a boutique consulting organization based out of Sydney. We've got about 30 odd consultants, and those consultants specialize in anything really to do with data and digital business. So everything from database solutions to data warehouse, data integration, analytics and reporting, that sort of stuff. And really, aside from that kind of consulting business that we do, we also manage service offerings around database and analytics and things like that. But what we're finding a lot of our customers these days, particularly in the enterprise and kind of mid-size organizations, they're coming to us with challenges around embracing digital technologies. And whilst we don't really want to, I guess, get too hung up on COVID-19 and so forth, it really has, in the last 6 months, made people really think even harder than they already were around some of what they need to do with embracing digital technologies and ways of reaching out to their customers and supporting their internal systems in a different way. So that's really a bit about us. Happy to provide more if people are interested, but I'll throw back to you, Buddha.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Paul. And now over to our second panelist, Arvind Tan from Tyk. Arvind, take it away.
All right, thank you, Buddha, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar from Singapore. So myself and Buddha, we are both based in the Singapore office. Now, Tyk is a very young and vibrant company. Our founder, CEO, actually started this whole project, open source project, about 6 years ago. He was having a full-time job, looking for API gateway, and couldn't find a good one, decided to build one himself, put it on GitHub as open source. And 2 years later, a lot of requests coming in from enterprises asking for a commercial edition. And that's where the company was born commercially 4 years back. So we have globally around about 80 plus employees around the world, spread across 20 over countries. Singapore, as Buddha and myself are based in, we serve the APAC market, right? We in APAC primarily work with partners, right, in the region, and that's where our relationship and partnership with Fusion in Australia came about. All right, we believe a good, strong and partnership, not just to resell the product, but also to enable the customers to use the product successfully, happy customers, so that they find value out of it. So Tyk as a whole is a very focused API management vendor supplier. Our product started off with a very what we call a built on a new technology with a very light footprint solution. So I guess that is a overview from me, introduction, and happy to discuss more on some of the topics that we have today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Arvind. Just out of curiosity, I think you did a pretty good job with also talking a little bit about the partnerships that you've had together. Like just for everybody to know, how long have we been partners now?
Yeah, we have been partners for 1 year plus now, coming to 2 years.
Okay, great. Yeah. That's a pretty decent time getting to know each other. We've done a couple of projects together, and yeah, hopefully we will shed some light on that shortly as well. So let's get into the topic straight away. Thank you for the introductions. And like I briefly mentioned, we have this terminology that keeps coming up quite a lot in our space. And that terminology is digital transformation. And that is fairly ubiquitous at this point of time from a perspective of what it does, what people think it does. And then in some cases that is almost overused, in some cases that is almost misused. So how about we start off with setting the scene a little bit and putting some context to this. So Paul, if you could tell us what you think or what your version or definition of digital transformation is, and then we'll go into how do you think that has sort of evolved, or has it even evolved over a period of time? Because this terminology has been around for a while now.
Yeah, thanks, Buddha. Yeah, look, digital transformation, people have been talking about that for, at least 10 years now. And I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different organizations. And when I think about it and when I reflect on what some of our customers come to us with, I think there's two very distinct views of where customers are coming from at the moment. One is traditional kind of enterprise grade customers, and that's really where we've worked most of the time that we've been in business. So we've been in business as Fusion now for 15 years, and most of our customers are well-established organizations. So they've got a pretty complicated, generally legacy type environment, which might have some kind of, I guess, what you'd call old school ERP and sales kind of technologies in the background. But what they need to do is find new ways to engage with their customer base. And their customer base could be, a fairly small, focused B2B type customer base, or it could be a very large customer base, which in more B2C style engagement. And I think digital transformation means different things depending on what that customer base is. So we like to, we actually use the terminology digital business platform in a lot of the work that we do now. And really that focuses on a couple of different things. One is the ability to present through, I guess, kind of a modern user interface, new business capabilities to customers and internal users of technology platforms. And we also see that as being an integration layer. So the mechanism to bring that user interface back to what is often a very mixed bag of legacy and sometimes more modern cloud-based applications, which actually support the core business of these organizations. And that's where, where Tyk has come in and where APIs come in and where that enabling technology fits, right in that kind of gap between exposing core business process out to end users using new technologies, new user interfaces, and so forth.
Okay, awesome. Arvind, I'm going to bring you in as well a little bit on this. So from a more API management, like I think Paul just touched upon the landscape being changing over the last 10 years and how things are now, we're moving towards a slightly more API driven sort of a world. So from your perspective then, how do you see the landscape really changing, and then potentially looking at some of the challenges that this has also brought about?
Yeah. So as we have seen at Tyk here in the last couple of years, I will break this into a few categories. One of them obviously is the public sector, where there are a lot of these public services that has been rolled out previously to the citizens, to corporations, maybe through forms, through manual forms and manual processes. And recently there is really a rush to digitize all these services in the public sector that we've seen, right? In order to reduce the lead time, and with COVID around, right? You know, people should be able to, corporations should be able to submit the data or information digitally, right? And that's where, right, there's a need for digitizing services, processes, and not just to roll out services to the public, but also to be able to exchange data between agencies, right? It's an internal transformation, digitization, as well as external digitization. So this is where we see a lot of this demand coming from the public sector. Now, in terms of a private sector, we're seeing quite a lot of fintech companies. Because of financial institution, they would like to provide more channels, more services to their end consumer, their retailers, right? There's a need to be able to consume or rather aggregate data from many other sources like the telecommunications, the insurance, and various data providers. And we've seen a number of these fintech companies providing what they call it a data aggregator, right? To aggregate data from different providers and then providing a platform to the financial institution on the other side as a consumer, right? So because of the need to digitize channels and ways of reaching out to the consumer, that's where this data aggregation platform comes into play as a whole. Of course, we've seen many more, like Paul said, many enterprise customers trying to transform their monolithic environment, right? We have a customer who started to migrate their ESB to APIs, right? Starting to migrate ESB to APIs and right, transforming the whole landscape and taking out ESB from their IT landscape. So those are a few examples that we have seen at Tyk generally in the market in the different industries.
Okay, great. Yeah, Paul, did you have something that you just?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and add, you know, when we're talking to people about digital business these days, you know, we're really finding kind of two flavors. One is, you know, yes, people are talking about APIs and the ability to expose and contain and to maintain and look after these APIs, but there's also this massive drive towards event-driven architecture, which is still based around APIs, but it's about triggering within their own internal organization events that allow you to propagate in much closer to real-time business transactions that need to occur. And these can be triggered by websites, they can be triggered by external devices, they can be triggered by IoT, they can be triggered by a lot of things, but it's about driving that event into your organization through your standard business process and doing something with it, you know, as quickly as you can. And that I think for a lot of particularly enterprise and government organizations is a real challenge. It's a very different way of thinking about things. And whilst, as Irvin touched on ESBs, you know, whilst some of these organizations have invested in ESBs over time, they're not necessarily still ready to adopt these event-driven architectures.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's something that I was going to just about touch upon on this, where we are sort of looking at fundamentally changing the thought process, like you just mentioned, where we are thinking about event-driven architectures, which is very different from what used to exist before, or when even people making this transition from even architectures from the point of view of monolithic to microservices, and how that transition needs to be made. How do you want to deal with it? How do you want to handle it? Is one better than the other or not? Sometimes maybe, sometimes maybe not. So I think I'm not always sure that if there is like a very, very straightforward answer that yes, this is it and this is what's going to give you success. But I think a lot of times it is really coming down to the use cases, the requirement, the size of your team, the cost effectiveness, the efficiency, that output that you want to go after. So there are definitely a lot of different considerations that come out of this. I think you've touched upon a couple of challenges already when it comes to making this transformative journey for businesses, where one of the key things is specifically around the mindset in terms of how do you think about that journey, and how do you look at achieving the outcomes that you want to. Are there any other particular challenges that you've seen that have come about, both from a sector perspective? I think, Arvind, you touched upon a couple of sectors from that matter, or from a region perspective as well. Like, do different regions look at things differently and manage things differently?
Yeah, I think definitely. We covered the APAC region. We touched on a few territories, places like Korea, Australia, Singapore. Some are definitely on the forefront of transformation, right? Countries like Australia, Singapore, Korea, they have been adopting this for the last maybe 2-3 years. Some has even adopted and successfully roll out a transformative program, right? In other countries like in India, some organization has just started to adopt APIs, started to develop APIs for that matter. So yeah, yes, different countries, although in the same region, but different countries has different levels of maturity. Indonesia, another big market that we see, has a lot of startup and fintech community, and they are starting to adopt APIs as well, looking at providing monetizing API, monetizing services to end customer as a managed services to their customers.
Okay. Paul, I'll get your as well. Sorry. So I'm just going to preface that with a little slight question so that you might even think about in that line. I think Arvind just touched upon levels of maturity and how that factors into the transformation that they go into. So how do you deal with it as potentially a service provider? How do you take people through that journey when you're creating solutions for them?
Yeah, and so I'll couple that question with a comment you made earlier about monolithic versus microservices, and I think what we see in the market anyway is it's on the one hand, you've got a bunch of newer organizations, fintech startups, all of that sort of stuff, who in a lot of ways have a much more blank canvas kind of approach, right? It's in some ways a lot easier for them to adopt APIs and event-driven architectures and so forth, because they've got a fairly clean slate to start from. It's, I think, much more challenging when you go into organizations who have got kind of this legacy monolithic platform, and they want to be able to provide the kind of technology agility of a microservice architecture without really having the flexibility to start again or so forth. So a lot of what we see in the challenges from our customers is how to provide that kind of microservice based architecture on top of a legacy based system. And if you're talking about big ERPs and big sales platforms and so forth, not wanting to name any names in particular, they have a varied mix of ability to present their business services via APIs. Some of them are better, some of them are not so good. And really, a lot of our challenge is how to provide that layer and how to present that layer so that it can be consumed in a more microservice type ready type environment. Yeah? And I think those as I was saying before, those challenges are quite different depending on the type of organization you're coming from.
Got it. Okay. Question around this, like, because I mean, I know a little bit about Tyk, obviously, and just thinking about how we sort of deal with these changing technology, changing architectures, and how we manage or almost enable a little bit of this digital transformation journey within businesses. So Irvin, what would you say then from a perspective of an API management platform or an API gateway in this instance? How important is it? What does it really enable in terms of potentially looking to solve some of these challenges that Paul and you've mentioned before?
Right. So putting into the context that I have shared earlier on some experience in public sector. In the public sector, in order to roll this out, transformation out to the public, the services, digitize the services, their security is a big concern for them, because you are allowing public consumers coming into their internal services, and we have seen a few cases of security hacking in Singapore. And so security is really a big concern, and they have actually endorsed a security architecture to be complied with, right? And because Tyk, in this sense, has a very light footprint, and to begin with, Tyk started off with microservices, right? We provide components in microservices form. And because of deployment that is agile, right? It's important that a API gateway will be able to fit into an architecture that needs to go through a compliance, that allows a service consumer coming in from the internet to be able to have a gateway in the middle, and to be able to then relay this request to the services in the back end, right? So a API gateway in that sense is important in this sense to fit into a secure architecture and compliance, right? Now, in terms of fintech on data aggregation example that I gave right, that fintech companies usually need to provide data to different providers or financial institutions. And those, again, due to compliance, data sovereignty compliance, right? Data has to sit in the country, right? And how do these fintech providers provide a single control plane, manage different countries of API gateways for them, for their consumers or for their customers? And that's where an API gateway which allows you to be able to deploy in different countries, to be able to fulfill the data sovereignty compliance, but be able to manage it from a single control plane, right? That's very important, right? Not just to install different instances, but different instances of gateway, but with a single control plane for a customer to manage all this in country. So there is a solution that Tyk will be able to offer, right, to fit in nicely with a data sovereignty compliance and be able to manage them in a single location, right? Yeah.
Go on. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to bring in Paul in this question as well, because you touched upon compliances, and again, that tends to be one of the key considerations these days when it comes to how do you handle data, how do you handle where your data is sitting, where your data is transitioning. So when you're thinking about building out these solutions for businesses, especially enterprise solutions, how do you look into that? What are the key considerations? What are the things that you think about when you're tackling this challenge?
Yeah, thanks, Buddha. So yeah, echoing, I guess, a lot of what Irvin was just saying. Yeah, when we approach these kinds of solutions for our customers, I guess there's four key things I'm thinking about from an architecture perspective. There's security, there's separation of concerns, there's governance and control, and there's monitoring and management. And really, you know, clearly security, we're working in an increasingly risky environment where there tends to be a lot of hacking and attempts to steal data going on. Separation of concerns from the perspective that, again, isolating your legacy systems and legacy processes from new front-end digital technologies that you're trying to present. I think it's really, really important to have a layer in the middle that allows you to separate and control what's going on. So, and hence where we started to talk to Tyk about API gateways, because we think it's really important to be able to separate the exposing of APIs and business process from the consumption of those and have a really good mechanism to control and manage that. And then governance and control. So it's important to have a centralized place that we can go to where we can manage the way that we're exposing APIs and other endpoints to either directly to consumers or to the, I guess, the systems that we're building on top of those that enable us to expose new business functionality to people. And then monitoring and management to be able to obviously meet the non-functional requirements that everybody's expecting. So 24/7 availabilities, you know, ability to scale in an almost unlimited way without exposing the back-end systems to potential denial of service and things like that.
Great, awesome. I think that sets the scene quite nicely for the next segment that we're going to be moving into, which is really this specific case study that we are talking about. In this case, we are talking about a client that we have worked together on and essentially trying to enable their digital transformation, business transformation journey together. And just to get the facts right, we're not talking about any small company. We're talking about a big enterprise company that is a top 50 ASX listed company. It is one of Australia's largest diversified property groups. And we're talking about a portfolio that is upwards of $25 million. Billion dollars, sorry, my mistake, $1 billion when it comes to retail, office, and logistics assets. So definitely a big system if you think about it from an overall, what they're managing, what they're handling. So Paul, I would like to just get you in on setting the scene once again from the perspective of what was the key challenges or objectives that they came to you with, and then we'll go through the journey together in terms of how we managed to solve that and got the outcomes.
Yeah, sure. So I think, you know, the key challenge, and we've probably touched on this a little bit as we've been talking already, but really the key challenge was taking a set of predominantly what I would describe as legacy, but perhaps more mixed mode applications that this organization was using, and being able to quickly and securely create new applications on top that provide the business users with the data that they need in closer to real time. So, you know, traditional ERP style applications, it's difficult to make change. It's difficult to provide new user interfaces and consolidated information. Some of that we can do through analytics and business intelligence, but more importantly, being able to provide new user interfaces to specific customers and business partners was really important to be able to kind of accelerate their digital journey. And this particular customer came to us with no real digital footprint at the time that we started with them, and that's a couple of years ago now. So that's clearly changed with the work that we've done, but it's been really setting that scene of taking a fairly large organization into the ability to produce new digital solutions for their customers.
Right. So with that then, in terms of approaching it as a problem, when you talk about someone who really did not have much of a digital footprint, which again could be a context that I think some of our attendees who might also be facing at this point of time. How do we get started? Because the journey just seems too difficult, too big, too large to undertake. So what was sort of your approach in making that transition not feel like, oh, this is the biggest thing in the world that we have to do and it's going to take us years before we see any results? So how did you sort of go through that process a little bit?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point, because taking an organization that hasn't done a lot of this directly into a digital age is really tough. And the way we've approached it is, I guess, fairly standard from that perspective. We've tried to take fairly small pieces of functionality, expose those pieces of functionality, and build new solutions on top in order to be able to, I guess, attack the problem a piece at a time. It does, though, require a bit of a platform on which to build, right? So the first piece before we can really deliver new business capability is to provide a bit of a platform capability. So that included determining new technologies that we were going to use to build with, and you know, some of this is written up in the case study, which obviously we'll make available. But we needed to choose a development language, because clearly there was going to be development work involved in this. And you know, from an integration and automation perspective, we went down the Python route. We needed to be able to choose technologies in order to be able to expose the APIs that we were going to build, and that's where we went to market. We were looking for a product that we could use to provide a secure API gateway and management framework, and that's obviously where we chose Tyk. And then we needed to pick off some key business challenges and to isolate down to a point where we could produce kind of, I guess, an end-to-end, I'd describe it as a thin layer of technology across a number of different systems, but producing some business outcome at the same time as being able to deliver some new underlying technology capability, which would enable the new business solutions to be built kind of more on demand as they were needed.
Fantastic. Just so that all our attendees are aware, if you have any questions coming up at any point of time during any of the discussion, do feel free to leave that in our chat. I'll pick that up as and when it comes through, or I'll take that up at the end of the session, but you don't have to wait till the end of the session. So do feel free to ask us any question if you would like. Thank you so much. Coming back to you, Paul. Thank you so much for that. I think, Erwin, so you touched upon a little bit about the key considerations. Paul, you mentioned about how you went about selecting Tyk a little bit in terms of the requirements. So Erwin, from the perspective of partners or even clients choosing Tyk as a solution, what are some of the key considerations that you see coming up? Like what does a typical analysis of different market options sort of look like? And ideally then, where does Tyk kind of come in and say, yeah, this is where we are really good at?
All right. So coming back to this particular case study where we work with Fusion very closely, when Paul approached Tyk at the point of time, there were some requirements that came in, right, mainly around be able to deploy this in a cloud region, be able to quickly set it up in a short time frame, and that obviously there are some other business functional requirements, and we work very closely with Paul and team to understand not just the main requirements, but also a little bit on the end user applications, what kind of systems, what kind of APIs they want to expose, what kind of volume they are facing, and things like that, right? And then we walk through a little bit on the architecture, right? To share with Paul and his team how the end architecture will look like when you go out for deployment, right? Be able to, like Paul mentioned, 24/7 availability. How do you deploy Tyk in order to support that blue-green deployment to make sure 24/7 is working well for the customers. So all these are some of the journey that we take, or rather the activities that we work together, not just with our partners, but also with our customers. And a lot of them will look at a few considerations. ease of maintenance, obviously one of the big ask for. All right, I will want to be able to roll out the platform successfully. Not just that, but be able to maintain it successfully with little effort, because some of these customers, they have a very small team, right, operations team to manage. So ease of maintenance is very important requirement for them. And also about how they always talk about hardware sizing, right? In order to deploy this platform, how much hardware are we looking at? How much CPU? How much memory are we looking at to be able to support X number of transactions and things like that, right? So those are really the of course the security authentication methods, some of these APIs, security methods. How does Tyk manage the security aspects of this? So I think those three main areas are most of the requirements I will face in most of the customers. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I do have a question, which is a great question, which I think I'm going to be tackling just in a little bit because it flows really well into what I'm going to be talking about next. But just before that, so let's talk, we've spoken about the challenge, the objectives, we've spoken about the approach, selection process of the technology. So how did that all come together? So when it comes to outcomes, where did we end up being? Like, how was the end result of that? And did that, again, I think maybe a little bit to that as well. Did that happen at one go? Was that a more of an iterative, ongoing process? Like, how was that split into?
Yeah, so look, it was it was a little bit, well, it was iterative. I mean, as I kind of touched on before, you've got to start with a platform. So we put together the platform, which consisted of Tyk running in the customer's private cloud, and we then built out some core capability around how we were going to develop interfaces back into some of the existing legacy systems. From there, we actually got a couple of use cases, and we started to develop kind of the end-to-end process that sat on top of those. And one of the kind of interesting ones, it wasn't actually the first one we did, but one of the interesting ones was being able to do presence detection within buildings, and then being able to monitor the number of people moving through a particular area or being present in a room, being able to take that information through to a dashboard and being able to monitor in real time the number of people passing through particular areas. So one of the presence detection technology that we used was actually also cloud-based. So it was able to feed information directly into the Tyk API gateway that we'd exposed on our edge, and we would pull that in, store it within the environment that we had, and expose that into dashboards and APIs for the customer to use. So there were a number of different streams of activity that we went through, but kind of culminated in having the platform in place and the ability to then rapidly deploy new solutions on top of that existing platform, using, and again, going back to, I'm an architect, I like to do these things in a coordinated, consistent way. So bit of an architecture that sat behind it so that we can then reuse some of the capabilities that we were building as we were going.
Fantastic. Okay. This again, now that means project is done, project is live. We are seeing outcomes, we are seeing results that are coming through. What happened or what is happening next? Is it something that you're now still working with this company and still looking to extend it? Or how was I think if I just look at the question itself, and the question talks directly about how did you make sure that the organization had the capability of managing and growing the technology platform after you were done? Or are you also involved in that process at this point of time on an ongoing basis to support them?
Look, we are still involved in it, predominantly from a project perspective. So part of what we did with this particular company was we also helped them to build up their internal support team capabilities. So they've hired new people, and they've done some additional work around how they're going to build and manage and deploy new digital solutions. so they needed to have an internal capability to do that, but also, you know, we are still working with them, and we continue to work with them on new solutions as and when required. So it seems to be a good working relationship that we have there, that we can provide the overflow resourcing that's required while still giving them the ability to maintain it internally where they want to.
Great, fantastic. And Irvin, from Tyk's perspective, when it comes to this ongoing support, ongoing management, so to speak, with how involved is Tyk in that process on an ongoing basis?
Yeah. So I want to add on that during the journey of implementation, we work very closely with Fusion and Paul and team. But I think the team actually grabs the technology very well. We didn't really support too much. They managed to implement it very fast and utilizing a lot of these features that we have. But then in the terms of support, so far we have been supporting any ad hoc questions that come in. As I said, the team was very well versed. They pick up the technology quite fast. But during this phase, even after operations, when the system has gone live, right? There are opportunities to review the platform and see, based on these new requirements, what kind of features or what kind of modules can we make use of in order to resolve some of these new requirements that come in. Obviously, I think as time goes by, the customer is also onboarding new APIs into the platform. So that is an ongoing process. But in terms of support, I think we have been supporting Fusion, but of course, to credit to the team, they have been implementing the solution quite well and be able to grasp the technology well. So far, very good. We have 24/7 availability, and it will go on. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'd just add on to that if I could. So I'm a real proponent of open source technologies. I think there's a lot of value in having something that can be moderated and viewed, particularly from a security perspective, in the open source community. And that's actually part of the reason that we looked at Tyk. But really importantly, for a large corporate style organization, they also want to be able to get support. So actually the mix between the open source platform and the ability to purchase a commercial support package was actually an important part of the consideration in making the decision. And we find that's worked really well. And just to give, Irvin and Tyk a bit of a thumbs up from us as well, it's a pretty easy product to use and maintain. So yeah, there is a support arrangement in place, but we find we don't need a huge amount of support in order to be able to do that, because the product works well and it's easy enough to support as it is.
Fantastic. It's good. I'm just being mindful of time a little bit. So I think I've got about a couple questions more. So I'm going to go quickly through that. Just to wrap up this case study that we've had, Paul, were there any specific key learnings that you came out of this, which you would want to highlight, for instance, which have been quite stood out to you?
Look, I'd say just the main one is an iterative approach is really beneficial in making any of these kinds of transformations. It's difficult often for large organizations to do wholesale change from the way they traditionally work into this more digital and agile environment. So yeah, take a small piece and build it out from there, build out the internal ability to build and maintain, and take it forward from there.
Great. Any key learnings, Irvin, from your part as well? Just to wrap this case study up.
No, I think the I wouldn't say key learnings, but a very good experience, a good journey with Fusion through this whole implementation, or this whole opportunity, I would say, to be able to understand not just from a technical perspective, from like you say, a real estate business domain perspective. We have learned a lot as well.
Okay, great. Okay, so I am again once been mindful of time, so I'm going to just wrap it up with the last question which I had, which was we've touched upon this ever-changing sort of world, more connections, more digital influence, there are more devices coming up, there are more platforms coming up. So in terms of what's next, what excites you the most from the industry domain, from the digital transformation journey itself, as well as what excites you from a Fusion Professionals perspective as well in terms of what's coming up next? So I'm going to take Paul first upon that, and then I'll come to you, Erwin.
I think what really excites me, and I think hopefully all of our team, is just the rapid adoption of some of these newer technologies, the adoption of event-driven architectures, the adoption of real-time analytics, real-time business processes, and I think that's a really it's a really interesting and exciting journey to be going on, and I think it will really mature over the next couple of years. So yeah, adding more real-time events and APIs into the environment.
Fantastic. And Erwin, from excitement perspective, what do we have in store for the digital world from Tyk?
So as a vendor for API management, I think what excites me is every time we have a new customers or new partner coming to us, it's about learning how to apply the technology into their domain, right? We have customers across different industries, right? Financial, fintech, government. We have even customers from entertainment, casinos, travel group. So there's a lot of variation, a lot of interesting use cases that we learn, and this get me very excited to be able to understand what's the customer using, how are they going to use, how do they want to apply APIs or API management in that space. Yeah, that is something that you once in a while you get something new and you really refresh your energy and look forward to the journey with the customer.
Fantastic, great. Okay, with that, we conclude our main panel discussion section of this. So thank you so much, both panelists. It's been a fantastic discussion. I hope our attendees have gotten value out of this, and it's been exciting for them as well as it has been for me hosting. Now I'm going to open things up for questions. We already had one question, I think, which we have addressed. If there are a few other questions, please do feel free to send them our way now. And we'll try and address them right away. Okay, let me just check the Q&A part of things. Okay, one question, and I guess this is a bit of a common question that comes up. Right, so there is a business. I've been using AWS to be hosting our APIs and our solution overall for infrastructure. We are now growing and servicing more and more internal, external clients, okay? And we are looking for an API gateway management solution. So I will not start with Erwin because I feel like that might be a biased question there. But I'm going to start off with Paul. So from a perspective of someone who is potentially on AWS, AWS obviously, for all to know, they do have an API gateway product as well. And so from a more neutral solutions provider perspective, how do you go about tackling something like this? What would be sort of the considerations once again when you are choosing choosing between different options for API gateways or the bigger aspect of API management solutions?
Yeah, look, I mean, the vast majority of our customers have some kind of presence in AWS or Azure or Google, vast majority of them. And so we do come across this question a lot. And look, there's different reasons for different customers why you would go with different solutions. And sometimes it is simpler. Just go with, you know, the AWS API gateway if that meets all your needs. In other cases, you might do the same with, you know, a Google Apogee type solution or whatever, right? But one of the things I look at just from an enterprise architecture and enterprise governance perspective is, again, and I kind of touched on this earlier, is separation of concerns. One of the things that worries me when you go all in with a single cloud vendor for all of that is simply that you're at the mercy of that vendor to provide you with all of the functionality. Now, I actually think particularly from a security and governance perspective, it's really a good idea to have a third party play in the space of that governance and control mechanism. In the same way that you wouldn't probably just use a complete endpoint security governance from a single vendor, I don't think you should really look at your entire API solution being driven from a single vendor perspective. So I think there's a good role for an independent third party product to sit there as your API gateway management framework, whilst you still may connect that up to an AWS or an Azure or Google infrastructure as well. And you might even use those things in combination. But I do think it's important to keep some kind of separation over the complete end-to-end governance.
Great. Okay. Coming to Irvin, so Tyk's the best, and let's leave it there, or do we say a little bit more there?
I think what Paul touched on some of the points already on platform. One of them is platform agnostic. A lot of customers come to us. They want to have that choice, right? Maybe today is AWS, tomorrow is Azure, or even tomorrow is a combination of both. Right. So we have customers who have deployed Tyk, not just AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, but even in Ali Cloud and some private cloud providers, and some of them has even a mixture of on-premise and cloud deployment. So the flexibility of that platform agnostic consideration obviously is one of them. And I think most of these enterprise or rather customers, they have some way of another a legacy system in place, right? It can be a identity provider, it can be some legacy systems that they want to integrate with, and Tyk has many more options of integrating with third party or surrounding IT components or IT systems, legacy systems that we can integrate with more options in that area. So those are the considerations that a lot of customers have taken on. Not forgetting that if you want AWS, Tyk can sit in very well AWS. We have a customer who integrate with AWS CloudWatch, deploy our containers in AWS Fargate, EC2, be able to monitor the usage very easily, and be able to even upgrade and spin off new instances in AWS very easily. So not just platform agnostic, but be able to support the cloud providers ecosystem well is an important consideration.
Okay. Just to complete that conversation as well, I think, and again, both of you sort of touched upon this a little bit as well. So from the perspective of choosing the right solution, I think it really comes down to what your requirements are. If you are really looking at a potential, say, a reverse proxy sort of a situation where you have a few APIs and you just want that to be run through a gateway for very, very basic needs, then perhaps extending your solution on an existing solution provider might be an easier, cheaper solution for you to do. If you're not looking to take on too much for that instance, perhaps that's one way of looking at it. However, if you are looking at considerations like I think Paul and Irvin both mentioned, when it comes to, we are looking at separation of concerns from a security perspective, separation of concerns from a governance perspective, from really identifying not just a gateway, but potentially an API management platform. that takes care of a whole range of full lifecycle API management system of yours, then perhaps something either independent on something which is a bit more scalable, something that is a bit more robust, potentially makes a lot more sense. And again, that necessarily doesn't mean that you have to change your entire solution, your entire architecture to fit in with that. But in most cases, the third-party systems integrate really well with existing infrastructure providers. Like I think with Tyk, for instance, we do integrate really well with AWS. And we actually, AWS happens to be one of our partners. So it's not like there is any bad blood there. They do recognize us as being a complete solution as well. And it benefits them from the perspective of they do what they do best and we do what we do best. So essentially horses for courses in this case. And that is true across the board for a lot of these things. So my recommendation at the end of this, it would be to really look into your solution as a whole. What are the objectives that you're looking at? And then based on your key objectives and considerations, choose a solution that fits in best. So yeah, I think that's about it. That's all the time we've got at this point of time. This has been a fantastic discussion. How do you feel about this, gentlemen?
Yeah, that was great. Really appreciate everybody listening in. It was really good to have a chat. Thanks, Irvin. Thanks, Buddha. And thanks to everybody who's listening.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Next steps on this, we'll have a follow-up. So everybody who's been on this and has been able to catch us live, fantastic. If you have not, we're going to try and get the recording out to you as soon as possible as well. There'll be a few other follow-ups that you can do. If you want to talk to us, if you want to interact with us, do feel free to send us an email. If you have any feedback as well, that'll be fantastic. We are hoping to do some of these on an ongoing basis with different topics within different journeys. We're hoping that it's going to be quite valuable for you from an understanding of the business perspective, from an understanding of how we work together, and hopefully from a context perspective of what you can apply to your own business and provide value. So with that, I rest my case for the day. Thank you so much, everyone who has joined us. And thank you to both of our panelists. It was an absolute pleasure facilitating this conversation. It's been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much.